We just discussed the difference between, we're discussing in general the difference between the four worlds, and we said there's a major difference between the first world and the other three, being that the first one is part of the world of the Ein Sof. It's called Atzilus because it's Etzel, close, and it is merely revealing what was already concealed in Hashem. It's not a Yesh Mi'ayin, it's not something new, right? Whereas Bria is the beginning of Metzias, the beginning of like sort of being found, that the creation experiences itself as separate from Hashem and cannot immediately link itself back and experience that it's being brought into creation all the time. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down at the period. You see that? Zehu? Anybody?
Zehu.
V'zehu kol hanikra b'shmi lichvodi. And this is what it means. All that it's called, going back to this pasuk, in my name and my glory, right? The shmi uchvodi, my name, my glory, hu hamiyuchad biyadayin. That represents something which is still united with me. It didn't create something separate yet. It's just his own name, his own glory, or like his ray. So that part of the verse refers to Atzilus, because it's still united with Hashem. Shekaya olam Atzilus, it refers to the world of Atzilus, to olam hayichud v'yitzklalus, which is the world of unification and inter-inclusion with Hashem. Sha'or sham betachlis hagilui, right? Where we were going through the different worlds, and there the light is as much as it can be revealed as possible, right? There's vessels in that world, but the vessels at that level do not cover over the light, but on the contrary, the vessels in that world actually reveal the light. And just to step into a conversation real quick, there's two different types of vessels that Alter Rebbe speaks about in Torah Or. There's vessels that conceal and there's vessels that reveal. And why do you need a vessel to reveal? Because the vessel actually helps bring something out. Like, for example, think about your speech, right? The fact that you have letters of speech, right? It's the letters of speech themselves that enable the concealed thoughts to actually show themselves, in a sense, right? So there's I'll give you a better analogy than speech, which is the one that's actually used in Hasidus, which is the body, right? Compared to the soul. The body, right, is a vessel for the soul, right? But it actually, what it does is it allows the soul to suddenly show up and have coordinates in this physical world. If you didn't have a body, your soul would still exist, but it wouldn't be able to show up. It wouldn't be able to reveal itself in this reality. So even the body sort of, when the soul goes into the body, it's a vessel, and it like sort of, wraps around it and causes finite constriction. But on the other hand, it actually enables it to express itself. So that's called a vessel which reveals, right? But then if you take that same body and you put garments on top of the body, those are vessels which are separate from the soul. Like the body and the soul become one. So the soul actually, materializes, as it were. And the body is not really something other than the soul. It's just like the manifestation of the soul in flesh. Whereas when all of a sudden you put garments, like your jacket, right, and your hat on top of this body, those are also garments, but those garments serve to block and hide something, right? They're not there to bring something out. So the same is different between the world of Atzilus, right, which it does have spheros, it does have kalim, right, and vessels, but the vessels of Atzilus are actually helpful, because if you didn't have the vessels of Atzilus, the light of the Ein Sof could never actually shine, because you need something to sort of give it a body and allow it to be seen. But then when you have the worlds of Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, those are already a totally different type of vessel. They're working sort of against the light, but they wrap themselves around the light and conceal it, right? So it's a completely different experience. And that's what he says, the Eino Dome Klal, L'Kamoshu Ba'olamos Biyah, right? That in Atzilus, which is B'tachlas Agiloi, to ultimate revelation, you can't compare it all to way the things are that godly light is in Biyah. What does Biyah stand for? Bri Yitzir Asiya. Uba Atzman. And when it comes to Biyah themselves, so you're dealing now with Bri Yitzir and Asiya on their own right, Yesh Chiluki Medregos Ba'agilei Oros. There's also there different levels of the level of revelation of the light. So even though in general, compared to Atzilus, they're all vessels that conceal, but nonetheless, there's a huge difference between the three of these worlds. Right? Each one has their own unique form of concealment. Amnam kol zehu ba'or shebala hachayos ha'olamos v'chinis v'mali kolomim. So this notion that there is a difference of revelation between one light, one world and the following world, this is only in that breed of light that we call mamali kolomim. If you remember from yesterday, what's mamali kolomim?
How Hashem invests himself in the world.
Right. Remember we said there's two basic kinds of light, mamali and sovev. Remember this?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about all these divisions that these spheros can hold more light or less light, right? All these divisions take place only in the type of light which is called mamali kolomim. That light which fills the world, because it fills the world, and depending on the size of your vessel, it will either fill more or less, right? But there's a light which is sovev light, which is infinite light. And basically it existed before Hashem decided to encloak himself into spheros and finite entities like a body in order to express himself. And this is a light which is higher than all the worlds. We call that the light of the sovev. What does it mean, sovev? Surrounding. It doesn't mean surrounding, we said, in the physical sense. It means surrounding in the sense that it's imperceivable to everyone equally, right? Because it's infinite and it cannot be contained. So if you're trying to perceive it with a container, whether it's a giant container of Atzilus or a small container of Asiya, your interest to limit it and put it inside of you is not going to work, right? Because you can't perceive the unperceivable. So it doesn't have the limitations, right, of being left out of you. In other words, it can dwell there, but just it dwells there in a way that the recipients don't have the tools to grasp it. And so it becomes unconscious or imperceivable. And this is the sovev light. And it comes in a way where it surrounds the worlds, i.e. surrounds, right? We know it's not a physical, spatial surrounding. And therefore, this light is not different in Atzilus and in Bria and Yetzirah, because why are there differences there? Because the vessels allow less or more in and then differentiate this ray, right? Just like your liver does not contain the same powers as your brain and your eyesight, right? Because the soul comes in, it sort of, it delivers more energy into vessels which are more sophisticated, right? And the vessels which are like your foot, right? It doesn't have the ability to experience the thinking powers of the brain because the vessel's smaller. But when it comes to the Or Sovev, which is equally beyond all worlds, so actually it's funny because it shines, it's the only light which shines equally in all the worlds, right? Because since it's not defined by how much you perceive of it, so it can equally dwell in the highest and the lowest because you don't get access to it based on how much you can hold it. So it's as equally in the highest worlds as it is in the lowest worlds, and it's equally unperceived by all of them. And that's what the Rebbe meant, or the Zohar meant, when it says, when you will subdue the Sitra Achra, you will reveal the glory of God in all the worlds. It doesn't mean you're going to reveal the glory of God in each and every world according to its own measure. Rather, it means you're going to reveal a level of light which is called equal in all the worlds, which is a fantastically wondrous thing, that we actually can, as it were, have access to the Sovev light, that which is beyond all worlds equally, but only in this world and only when we have Iskafia, when we subdue our Yetzer Hara. Which means to say that this light, the way that it's found is in all worlds equally. But in order to draw this light, so it's revealed in all the worlds, so it's basically like surfaces in the world. This only comes out through our work on refining the darkness, which, as we said, why is it associated with our work in this lowly world? Because Hashem desired a dwelling place in the lowest world. And since therefore his desire, his greatest essence is somehow triggered and caught by what pleases him, which is not the higher worlds and all the revelation of God that goes on there. On the contrary, those worlds are actually a step down for Hashem. because basically his essence is not revealed in those worlds, and therefore only a little ray of him is revealed in those worlds. But when you get to the bottom of the ray, which all of a sudden you wind up with resistance, right? And then you can undo that resistance, you can fight against that resistance, called iskafia. For some reason, that process of iskafia unleashes his true essential delight, and along with his true and essential delight is this infinite light. And when it gets revealed here, it actually winds up getting revealed in all the worlds. In other words, once it like sort of shows up, since it's in every world equally, we actually wind up dumping all this light, this sovev light, into all the worlds, and all the worlds gain from what we do here. This is like the sort of the notion of why we say Kaddish for people, and we do mitzvahs for the departed, right? Because when you do a mitzvah in this world, you like surface the sovev light in all the worlds. In which case, everybody sort of gets fed, but they can't feed themselves. We're the only ones that can feed the worlds this light. Daniel, you following all this? Okay, you have yourself a copy?
I'm listening. I think
Maybe share one. We ran out. Okay. V'zeu kadiskafi sitra achra, and that's what it means when you will subdue the sitra achra. Meaning, kasher poel bavodaso, when you have accomplished in your work, the osiskafi sitra achra is havcha chashuch l'nahora, to somehow subdue your Yetzer Hara, or even at a higher level to transform it, to use it for good. So there's this phrase we see from Shlomo HaMelech, that there's an advantage of light that comes from darkness specifically. And that is when the darkness itself gets turned into light. It becomes an advantage to the light, so meir begilui, that it now shines in a revealed way, to the point that it shines to the lowest places. Hainu, shenimshach haor ba'ofen kazeh, which means the light shines in such a way, she'ofen hamshachaso hu b'chol ha'olamos b'shabeh, that the way that it shines is in all worlds equally. So I'd like to just redo this phrase here, because there's a fascinating way of understanding this statement that Yisruna or Mina Choshech, right? There's an advantage of light from darkness, right? So it's kind of a famous drasha. There's three different ways of breaking this down, right? Does anyone remember what they are from previous classes? We spoke about this a little bit. There's three ways of translating that statement. There's an advantage of light from darkness. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The first one is just light is better than dark. Simple as that, right? If you have light, it'll chase away the darkness. Second?
Was it like getting the darkness to realize that it was light? Like revealing the...
This is going to be the third level.
Okay.
What's the second level?
Enlivening the darkness, not through transformation, but through subjugation.
How are you enlivening the darkness? Through subjugation.
Like you add extra light.
Right. When you have darkness, it creates an advantageous light.
Yeah.
You know, you can have a regular light, right? But when you bring darkness, and therefore all of a sudden there's an opponent, so the light has to, like, so to speak, work harder in order to overcome that, and therefore the light brings deeper levels of itself out in order to overcome the opponent, right? That's also called an advantage of light that comes from darkness. Because not just that simply light is better than dark, but that there's two different kinds of light. There's regular light, and there's advantageous light, which all of a sudden has to come from a much deeper place and shine brighter only when the opponent comes in. So in that case, the darkness becomes useful to you, and this is kind of the concept of having iskafia comes in, right? That when you have iskafia, you're going to take this lowly dark world, and you're actually going to gain something from it in this world, with your soul in this world, with a place where specifically it has this opposition, where you would not be